Welcome everyone. I'm Nick Pesh, Randstad ANZ CEO, and will be the moderator of these discussions today. Today I'm joined by Pip Russell, who is the VP for Strategy, Innovation and Commercial Operations for Schneider Electric. Welcome, Pip. David Din, our Chief Executive Officer and co-founder at Ozdoro. So welcome, David. Francois Rollin, the Director of Tenant CS. So welcome, Francois. And Wazim Solomon, Managing Director of Winning Formula. So welcome to everyone and thanks for joining us. Today on our panel, we're discussing the topic, workplace and remote work, what future for our CBDs? So just before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. Pay my respects to the elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Plus an acknowledgement and thank you to the French Australian Chamber of Commerce for the organisation, to Schneider Electric, the naming rights on this forum, the French Embassy, Austrade, and sponsors for their support throughout. And just a reminder, there's a Q&A chat on the side of the video, but if you prefer, there'll be a 15-minute live Q&A at the end of the conference. So, all right, so let's kick it off. First question to you, Pip. And we've all had a different experience, I suppose, through 2020, quite a different year. But for yourself, your experience of COVID through 2020, what has been the impact on your people, the offices, and maybe even the ways of work?
Great, thanks Nick, and great to be with you here. So I guess for some context, we're actually not a CBD-based organisation, and largely around the country, we are a metro-based. And so for us, the journey in 2020 has been an interesting one in that in Sydney, we have been on a 2-year journey to actually relocate and move to a brand new building. So 2020, right through COVID, we have been in the design and fit out stage of our new space in Macquarie Park. I guess one of the benefits for us being in a metro area like Macquarie Park is that we have got parking so that people can get to work by car, and we've got sufficient parking for everybody at this stage. Pre-COVID, on the journey to our new building, we actually had rather purposefully reduced our footprint by 40%. So we were moving into a smaller footprint in our new building, and COVID really made us stop and reflect on, does the design still work? Does it still make sense? So we've been on that journey this year. And the reality, I guess, is that with the requirement to have 4 square metres a person at the moment, that we've got sufficient space. So towards the end of September, we actually opened up our new building, and it's COVID safe. And so we were able to invite people from Sydney back to work. And we have invested in technology to enable us to do that safely. So one of the things we have got and implemented is a desk booking system so that we know who's in the space and how it's being used. And that also, if we ever needed it, which we certainly hope we don't, would allow us to also do some contact tracing. So in terms of, I guess, new ways of working, I think fortunately for us in the Pacific, so Australia and New Zealand, we have been on a journey with flexibility for the last 5 years. So it wasn't something that we needed to sort of immediately kind of completely change the way we worked. It's certainly accelerated, and I think certainly for all of us has really given us some new opportunities to kind of try out some roles that we perhaps didn't think were flexible, and we've all proved to ourselves that they are. In terms of productivity, I'd say actually that working from home, where in the period where everybody worked from home, our productivity, I would say, was definitely higher. And now that we're inviting people back in the different states, and certainly in Macquarie Park, back into the office, we're actually pretty happy to have some deproductivity. We're okay with that for people to have the opportunity to come back and have those incidental talks and chat to team members and other other folk around the office that they haven't spoken to. Because for us, coming back into the office at least for some of the week is a really important part of culture, and I think that's something that for us is going to be here to stay. We did a survey through the COVID period just to gauge how our people were feeling, and by and large, over 80% of them actually indicated that they want to spend at least some of the time back in an office environment when it was safe to do so. And we're seeing that now in terms of utilisation and seeing people coming back. So I guess as a wrap, yes, it's had an impact as it has for all of us. I think we've learnt some really important lessons, and I think new ways of working and working flexibly or hybrid is definitely here to stay.
Yeah, excellent. And look, certainly here in regards to negotiating new leases, we did a similar thing in Sydney, having to take up a new lease and move during this period of time with like you say, all the other stresses that COVID's brought. I'm not sure, Francois, whether your experience through this time as well?
Yeah, and it's been quite a different journey, I would say, for CBD tenants and suburban metro tenants, simply because of the overall footprint. Suburban tenants tend to have larger footprint, and it was easier to implement some COVID safe plans, easier as well for staff to drive to the office instead of coming by public transport. And so the return to work, and I will touch on that later, has been better in suburban offices compared to CBD ones, for sure.
I'm not sure, Wasim, your experience through this time?
Well, the nature of our work really is consulting, so our preference is to be wherever the client is. What we found is that definitely the first couple of months, back in March and April, most people were panicking, didn't know what they want to do. But after it got a bit quiet, what we found, around 70% of the clients prefer that we do not work with them in the office because they're not in the office in the first place. 30% prefer us to work with them in the office, which is our preference. I think it's similar to people. What we do is kind of automation and technology. So it wasn't a very tough transition for us to move into this mode of work. We did find the productivity mixed bag. So it's actually, we found it role specific. So roles like data scientists, programmers, engineers, productivity went up significantly because they save like a couple of hours of commute. The nature of the work, they can sit on their own and work. The face-to-face kind of process re-engineering, change management kind of people had to work at least 20% more to accommodate that they no longer can bump into somebody for a coffee. Yes, but overall, we managed to make up for the difference. When we surveyed our team, I would say 80% of them would love to go back to the office, definitely for brainstorming exercises. But all of them almost would prefer to have some days working from home.
Yeah, and look, I know even within Randstad, we have about 700, 800 employees spread across Australia in a lot of the CBDs. And I think the feedback that we got to our surveys was very similar, that a mix is probably what people are looking for, rather than one way or the other. David, not sure your experience during this time?
Well, we've had similar issues that I'll echo with like Pip. I mean, there's a lot of transactions going on with people downsizing or having a hybrid model. We're seeing that across the board, both for people who've been in traditional commercial office spaces as well as co-working spaces. And we're also seeing a lot of offices trying to retrofit as well. So like the modernization of the existing spaces and open floor plans just to accommodate for the directing of foot traffic in certain directions is a very, very basic example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might stay with you, David, because when we think about commercial real estate and the trends you've seen through 2020, perhaps how are existing tenants coping with the empty office spaces during this time?
Look, overall, I think the value of the transactions in the commercial office space in Australia have fallen in anywhere in the region of 50 to 60%. I mean, but that's only reflective of the fact that people have just gone into hibernation. A lot of the people who've been, either thinking of changing offices or thinking of purchasing from an investment perspective or a new tenant perspective have just been putting on hold. Where we're seeing a lot of the changes happen is people moving from, like, say, the traditional office spaces into something a bit more flexible, a bit more like, well, can we negotiate, say, a one-year lease instead of a 10-year or 5-year lease? We're seeing a lot of hybrid models of organizations having departments in co-working spaces as well. So I think there's a transition away from like the traditional office into that sort of flexible space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure, Wazim, perhaps have you got a view or an experience of note this year in regards to that?
Well, this is not really my area of expertise, Nick, but I can go by what we're seeing with our clients, and it's exactly what I think David is saying. Many people are hesitant to lock themselves into long-term leases. So many balls in the air from all angles, and we'll talk about it later today. It's really hard, when I think about it, really hard to forecast how many desks you will need. I was having a drink the other day with the person who managed for CBA, the building of the new building 10 years ago. And that was even before COVID. And he said by the time they finished the drawing and the contract, they were planning for 5,000 employees. When the building was ready, it was 6,200. So even before the building was opening, the figures changed. Now, obviously, we are in a different environment now, but I guess what I'm saying is really, really hard to get this forecast right. If anybody gets it 100% right, they deserve a big prize.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. And like you said, our own experience in Sydney, when we're looking at leasing property, looking at what that percentage is, it's quite easy to say whether it's 85, 80, 75, but whether you get that correct is another thing. And Pip, you touched on your own experience recently around that and the challenges of trying to identify how much space you actually need.
Yeah, and I think that's really it's like, if we look back, we know that we go through cycles where we expand and then contract. So I think, the comment earlier about the length of the lease and what we're being locked into, I think is, and particularly when you're an organisation like with our new space where you're putting in internal stairs, that becomes a real question.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's something, Francois, with your experience, we talk about the length of the lease or the flexibility of those arrangements to come and go, whether you see that changing or whether you've seen that change through 2020.
We've definitely seen it, and the tenants who do have a lease expiry and are on the market looking to either renew on existing or relocate are definitely looking at shorter term leases, more flexibility, including a break clause in their lease. And to touch on what David was saying about co-working operators, at the beginning of COVID, companies that were in a co-working space decided to end their contract, everyone working from home. And so the beginning of COVID period was very tough for co-working operators, but over the past few months, they've actually been quite busy with a company as deciding to vacate their office and then offer co-working or working from home to staff for the time being, while they assess what they want to do in future and how much space they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep touching on our own experience when you talk about, maybe traditionally we just extend the leases and we stay where we are. But if you're talking about changing your footprint or reducing your footprint, suddenly that brings in other elements like the new premise, and then like the fit out, and then like the organisation, and even just looking at the timing that takes, right?
I thought. I thought I'd just butt in there, Nick. And the trends we are seeing is people are just holding it out and in sort of like a semi-hibernation mode, and knowing that these things do take a long time. And 2021 does look like it's going to be a bit different than 2020.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Francois. Then maybe this question to you, a little bit controversial, but are our CBD offices dead? Is it actually the case, and what do you think of the current state of our CBDs?
So CBD market have suffered the most during COVID compared to fringe or suburban markets. The return to work rates that we see in CBDs are quite low. Melbourne around 5 to 10%, Sydney 30 to 40, and Perth and Brisbane, which have been less affected by COVID, have return to work rates are around 60%. And we are seeing companies asking their employees to work from home till 2021, or sometimes indefinitely. Thinking, tech companies such as Twitter or Facebook encourages staff to work from home indefinitely if they want to. Landlords on their side are doing everything they can to attract tenants back in the office, especially in CBD markets. They implement COVID plans to guarantee safety of all staff. And in terms of contract and leases, they've been offering more generous incentives to attract or retain tenants. And we've seen many tenants having a lease expiry and just going on a month-by-month basis till they figure out what they want to do. Being a tenant advisor over the past few months, we have worked with a lot of businesses to conduct workplace analysis involving HR, finance, procurement, and IT, and running employee survey. And the objective is for businesses to understand how much space is really needed moving forward and how much space could be offloaded. As a result, we're seeing a boom of sublease stock becoming available on the market, and that's really a trend across Australia. Just last week in Sydney, Westpac announced that they were looking at offloading 7 floors, about 50,000 square meter in Barangaroo, so a significant amount of space. And by January, we estimate the stock of sublease will reach about 200,000 square meter. In terms of vacancy rates in CBD markets, they are on the rise, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, where pre-COVID they were very tight around that 3% mark. We now at rates about 7 to 8, and by January we anticipate they will be about 9 to 10%. So significant change in the market, especially in CBD, where landlords in Sydney, I'm thinking Sydney, Melbourne in particular, at the upper hand, and that's really changing. So to answer your question, CBD offices are not dead, but they will look different to how we know them. We anticipate tenants to have smaller footprints in CBDs. Staff will do more focused work from home, and then come to the office for meetings, to collaborate, and to socialize. And the workplace will have to be more agile to comply with COVID regulations for now, while allowing for future growth and potentially allowing more employees back in the office after a vaccine is found. Some companies are also exploring a multi-location strategy, which is new, because over the past 10 years, companies were looking at consolidating all their offices into one. Now it's the complete opposite. And so we see companies thinking of having a small CBD hub and then suburban satellite offices. That's great news for suburban landlords, not so much for CBD landlords, obviously. And we might see in future a shift in the kind of buildings that we find in CBD markets across Australia, meaning less offices and more residential building. And about suburban market, we see co-working operators looking at tapping suburban location because they feel there is a growing demand there. Overall, I would say working from home is not suitable for every employee, and many companies also don't have a CapEx budget to invest for a new fit out in a new location. And I believe the office is still needed to retain company culture and really ensure that transfer of knowledge, particularly for new employees. So it's great time to be a tenant on the market, particularly if you're a CBD tenant.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. Some really good insight there, particularly, and we talked about this the other week about the move from commercial maybe to residential a little bit more in the CBD. Also, you talked about the hubs and the decentralisation of the organisation more so than the consolidation into that one main hub. Big trends. Absolutely. I'm not sure, David, have you seen similar trends, or you believe similar trends will play out?
Yeah. I strongly concur with Francois on that point, particularly around the decentralization of the offices of some of the bigger organizations, allowing people to work in the suburbs, but there will be the need for them to have the infrastructure and the sort of co-location areas in the suburbs. That is currently a trend we're seeing overseas, and we expect that to possibly replicate here in Sydney and the rest of Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure, Pip, you mentioned that you're not in the CBD, but you're in the city. Do you see Snyder going down that path as well?
At this stage, in terms of, you mean having more metro hubs, or at this stage, probably not. And I think, when we choose where the office is, we kind of look at where everybody lives, and I think it sort of works for us. But I think that's an interesting, certainly I've heard it discussed, and it'll be interesting, to see how that pans out, or if not regional, like what people are going to move out of the suburban areas and the CBD, and potentially, if you can work from anywhere, what could that look like?
Yeah. But maybe down at Byron Bay, hey? Where,
that's right. Although here it's pretty crowded now, but yeah, perhaps.
I think it is. I think it is pretty crowded. Wazim, have you got any thoughts on the CBD in regards to, is it dead? What is it going to look like?
It's quiet. It's much quieter than I've ever seen it. And we do have co-work office ourselves. We didn't let go of it during the initial COVID issue. But yeah, it's very quiet. It's picking up. I like going there. I'm there at least twice a week. I cannot replace the face-to-face interaction with our clients. That's me personally. But if I go by them, as I said, 70% of them don't want to go back to the office. And in some cases, they will say you need a C-level approval for somebody to walk into the office, because nobody wants to have, nobody wants to be the one who brings the virus into work office and causes a shutdown. If I go by our clients, at least a couple of them are doing this kind of satellite hubs, in addition to a centralized headquarter. And it seems to be working all right, like Francois said, and David. But I wouldn't say the CBD is done, but there's lots of pressure on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the face-to-face interaction is so important in our work life. And I think my own experience through the start of this, it was almost like a survival type scenario for the first couple of months, and just surviving as an organisation, with your colleagues. Now it's looking more that medium longer term. What do we do, and how do we balance obviously being safe, but also then keeping the workplace culture and the interaction and the learning, the informal learning that we do when we're together. I think you mentioned it, Pip, at the top, that you thought that was a really important part of, I suppose, our work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, the reality is that humans need connection, and I think we've found that connection, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever platform we've used, has certainly been effective. But I think there's a lot of people that you don't connect with because you haven't scheduled time with them, and I think it's those more incidental connections and the opportunity for creative thinking and brainstorming and sharing, I think, that are really important. And I think also just reflecting on our younger talent who are coming through our organisations, if we each reflect on our own learning, I'm sure a lot of our learning was because we heard what was going on around us in the office and we learnt from others. And I think that's also an important consideration going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that certainly in our organisation as well. So Francois, the CBD is not dead, but it might just look a little bit different. That's what you're telling us. So I've made note of that. Now, Wazim, to yourself, in regards to the future, if we look at the future of work and how that plays out, and obviously COVID-19's been a catalyst and sped up a lot of change within the world. But what about around digital workers working in the cloud? How do you see that?
Okay, that's a tricky question. But I do like the word digital worker. Some of our clients even will go as far as calling them EFTs. whatever suits. And just to be clear and be on the same page, we're not talking about physical robots, because we're talking about the CBDs and future office and white collars. So the focus is not on self-driving vehicles or factory bots that assemble cars. We're talking about white collar bots, what we call them digital workers. So as an example, a digital finance worker that processes invoices or reconciling accounts, or a digital ops workers that open accounts for clients or respond to customer inquiries, or preparing statements or reports, or maybe even a sales digital worker, assessing and following up leads, or preparing quotes for clients and following up with them. I actually, by the way, I'm aware that for Schneider and Randstad, you guys do have quite a few of these digital workers in the cloud. I don't know how many, but I do have some connections in both organizations. So the short answer to your question, Nick, we do believe that COVID-19 had an impact on the number of digital workers in the cloud, and it's actually a big impact. It's a bit tricky to identify how many digital workers are out there, because the way of measuring what's a digital worker is different. Is it a bot that does 8 hours worth of human work? Is it one virtual machine? Is it one process? So there is no consensus in the industry on how to define the number of digital workers. We typically at Winning Formula call a digital worker is the one that equates to 8 hours worth of a similar job done by an FTE, a normal human being. But to answer your question, I think maybe one of the proxies we can use is how much money was spent globally on licenses for the software that produces these digital workers. And if I quote a Gartner report from September, actually, they observed 12% growth compared with last year. The market size is $1.6 billion. That's only software. Yep. And 12% in a year like this year is actually not bad, considering all clients are very conscious of cost cutting and not getting into new investments. Even more interesting, what they're forecasting for next year, it will go up to 19.5%. Wow. So that's kind of staggering. If you think about it, it's a huge number. This is, again, only licenses. Now, what that equate to million digital workers globally or tens of millions, I don't know the answer, but I can know from many of our clients at the moment, they actually will advertise on their ASX report how many digital workers they have. And we have many of them actually do that and compete with the competitors and how many they have versus the others and so forth. One recent example is a client of ours, and it's represented actually today, where they have like 55 digital worker in a small division that has 180 normal FTEs. So that gives you a feel of the percentage. But to be clear, I mean, this kind of digitization and has been going for a while. So why did COVID actually bring it even got businesses to ramp it up? I think you may remember back in April, Tesla CEO went, and it was like headlines back then in April, and talked about, and I'm talking about Andy Pan when he talked about all their call centers operations in the Philippines and India went down during the initial months of COVID-19. They just didn't function. So what they ended up doing is that they brought most of this work back, like for call centers locally, but I'm quoting, further digitize and automation work is happening. We're building more capacity here on temporary basis. And this is kind of the new term that, not really new, I mean, we are in the industry, so I've seen it for a couple of years. I'm not sure if you heard of it, Nick, or other panels, the term backshoring or homeshoring. Yeah. So this is kind of one of the main reasons this kind of the digital workforce has been picking up. Many companies, and we have actually two of them, of our clients who suffered similar to Tesla, and bringing work back home, but in the cloud, was to ensure that there is interrupted services to the clients. That's the number one. Secondly, the flexibility in scaling up and scaling down. If you think about it, if you want to scale up, I mean, I've been hearing about inducting people, the office space, desks. If you want to scale up a robot, it's a 2 minutes job. just pick up the phone or drop a line to one of your IT people and they will fire up a new VM. The program is there. And you don't need to worry about training or anything. If you want to scale it down, which is in an environment where many businesses don't know whether they should go up or down, you need this flexibility. So scaling it down is also as simple, if not even more simple. And you don't need to worry about exit interview or anything. You just switch it off and the robot will not complain. So that's kind of why we see an increase in digital workforce. On the other hand, well before COVID, building digital workforce has been gaining significant momentum for almost 3-4 years. If I quote Gartner and Forrester, they call it the fastest growing enterprise software segment. And actually, Gartner, in one of the reports well before COVID, it was, I think, like November last year, they were talking about in 2024, organizations will lower operational costs by 30% just by doing intelligent automation together with operational excellence. 30%. So that's not coming from anywhere other than us as people and office space. Oxford did similar thing lately, and they came up with very similar conclusion. So I think business who started on the robotics and automation journey, they can relate to that. They know that the cost of a digital worker is maybe 40 to 50% of that of an offshore worker, and it's a tiny fraction of an onshore worker. So it wasn't surprising to see this kind of ramping up. Even Telstra, the example I said, nothing new in what they did. That was 2018 strategy to reduce their operation cost by $2.5 billion. Another reason why businesses have been investing in building their digital workforce is to deliver better customer experience. Like these digital workers are sitting in the cloud, working 24/7. They don't skip a step in the process. They don't do any cowboyish action with the client. They just follow whatever the process is. And we have strong evidence in almost double-digit improvement in customer satisfaction when we introduce this. I mean, lastly, it's a silly one, but like they're easy to manage. Digital workers. They wouldn't be bickering with colleagues. They wouldn't have to be too much drink over Christmas party and break any organization workplace policies. So I think to sum it up, so while I'm not saying at all the digital workforce can replace everything humans do, far from it, I can say with confidence that all the research and actually hands-on we see is between 20 to 40% of all what white collars do can easily be outsourced to digital workers. So to conclude, we believe the impact of growing digital workforce will over the coming 2-3 years will be a bit tough on CBDs and workplace in general, but also on humans, and the social impact is the one that kind of comes to mind, that kind of concerns us the most. Hence, we work on the training, upskilling, redeployment, and things like that. Long answer, but I thought like this thing is happening. I think again to you and Pip, you are already there, and other businesses are already on that journey. So I'll be really keen to hear what everybody think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps maybe and look, totally agree. It's another factor that we need to take into account when we're thinking about our footprint, particularly if we're leasing property where we're talking about physical FTE in the office and the room and the space they need, looking at the trends of your organization in regards to, like you say, use of technology and automation for certain functions, the impact of that in regards to the requirement of space, for sure. Pip, I'm not sure whether, have you got anything you want to add to that discussion?
Well, I guess as Wasim said, at Schneider, we have been exploring and implementing RPA and digital workers. And for two reasons: for efficiency, but as Wasim said, for customer experience. So I think that's a trend. I wouldn't necessarily say it's been accelerated by COVID. It was certainly it was a journey that we were on, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the customer experience, absolutely, I agree there. is to make sure that we're maximising that. All right, now if we go back and talk about our property, if we think about opportunities for commercial property owners, maybe Francois, can you, or David, maybe if one of you, if we think about 2021 and beyond, where do the opportunities lie for our commercial property owners?
I mean, the basic stuff initially, I mean, doing the staggered arrival times and, you know, organizing staging areas for elevators, a lot of this stuff is very short term. I mean, Francois did hit on the nail there with a lot of subleasing happening in the market. Whether or not that's going to be something that's going to last, you know, 5-10 years, I think it's going to be, you know, very temporary, just whilst people adjust to this. You know, having traveled overseas and seeing the trends happening, you know, specifically in, you know, Asia, it seems like we're going to go through a bit of a overshoot and a readjustment anyway. So if anything, my gut feel tells me the commercial property market trends are going to head in the right direction. Ideally, everyone's going to be back in the office, but I know that's going to be probably post-COVID and with the vaccine, as Francois hinted. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe as well, landlords will be looking at diversifying their portfolio and look at more suburban assets, which some of them would not necessarily do in the past, to limit risk. But no doubt that for landlords that have a big exposure to CBD markets across Australia, they will be impacted over the next 3 to 4 years. And what we see is there's going to be more competition to attract tenants in your building, and landlords are already anticipating that and think, what we're talking about before about customer experience, it's exactly that. What do tenant wants? And landlords are very keen at the moment to engage into conversation with tenants, understanding what their needs are now to comply with COVID plans and with immediate needs, but also in the next 3 to 5 years. And that can be services in the building that are not being offered at the moment that landlord will be keen to invest in and really upgrade the level of services in CBD buildings so they can basically be competitive against suburban buildings because they have something else to offer.
Yeah, okay. So if we think about COVID as a disruptor, I mean, commercial property in the CBD, obviously levels of disruption, but we might come out of it in even a stronger position where, like you said, there's more flexibility. The services that are on offer are greater, and it becomes an even more positive experience from a workplace perspective in the CBD. And look, our topic, workplace and remote work. Let's perhaps go there. Pip, does remote work stay? What's the future?
Yeah, I think it absolutely stays. In fact, just last week, globally, we have announced that our flexibility policy is that the expectation is that everybody who can works at home 2 days a week, which will significantly have an impact on our real estate footprint for sure. So certainly for Schneider, it's definitely here to stay.
Okay. And perhaps, Wazim, your thoughts on that? Remote work, is it here to stay?
Well, it's just answered. Like, these are the clients. So Schneider is one of like any of our clients. You are like any of our clients. You were a client of ours in the past. So basically, what we do is just follow what the client wants us to do. And as I said, 70% of them are strongly pushing for remote work. 30% would like to have like in office. But yeah, it's here to stay. There is no doubt about that. The impact on real estate, that's I'm not the expert in that, but I think there is downward pressure. One thing on the CBD issue is just to go back to the point from Francois and David. In Australia, we're a bit different, I think. CBDs is really the CBD. I don't know if the CBD term actually exists in many other countries. What I mean by that, you could be 5-10 kilometers away from your destination, but to go to the CBD, which is 30 kilometers, is much easier because the transport is much easier and indirect. So many of our employees and our clients' employees, we find them really longing to go back to the CBDs. So I don't know again what the impact would be when I hear people talking about metro and kind of hubs. I find CBD attractive to myself and many of my team members and some of our clients' employees. It's just the ease of getting there.
Absolutely, and even within our Randstad business, I see that when you think about transport, you know, it might be a 30-minute train drive, but it's far easier getting into the CBD on a train rather than driving 15 minutes, having to look for car parking, pay for car parking, all of those sorts of things. I agree 100%. And actually, when we look at properties within our business, obviously transport and accessibility is one of the key things we look at, right? Which I'm sure everyone does. Really important in that part. David, your take on remote work and whether it's here to stay?
Look, I definitely think it's here to stay. I do think the challenges lie in the sort of innovative and you know, the creative sides. I mean, we see that in the co-working spaces for decades where you know, people need to be together, you know, physically just to innovate and create. And I think that's going to be a challenge. I'm seeing success through Zoom and Google Meets of that coming out where, you know, they do have technology tools to enable, you know, more whiteboarding and more collaboration, you know, remotely. It's still very early days, but it'll be interesting to see how like new products and services evolve from that.
Yeah, for sure. And Francois, I'm not sure whether your view in regards.
In terms of remote work, I think everyone is very pleased with you know, being able to work from home. Companies are having a tough time to plan for future, knowing who will work from home on a more permanent basis, and so we see some contracts. Some employment contracts being modified, and some of them now including that the role include 2 days a week working from home. That helps businesses to plan their footprint. It's going to reduce, no doubt, to what we see today. I have more of a question mark around in 3 or 4 years' time, will people love working from home as much as they do today?
And I think that's the challenge for all of us. We're setting our businesses up, our office space for a moment in time, and it's whether that moment in time continues. And those people that say 85% or 65%, whichever one you need, is that, you know, you don't want to be that company that's got that office that everyone walks past every day and says, hey, they obviously set up for something that happened for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Now look at them there, and then, like you said, the cost of that move or the changes can be quite prohibitive. Absolutely. Now, another interesting one.
Nick, Nick, can I just jump in on that one? I think it's also challenging is to think about why is work done Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 as well, isn't it? So kind of that future work, I think, is not just where you work, but it's how you work.
Yeah, absolutely. Wazim, have you got a view on that?
No, absolutely, 100%. Very good point. What we found, it's two-way street. So people working from home, we have a couple of parents, and men and women, who have duties to look after their kids, take them to school, bring them back from school. And I find them communicating with their client at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. and sometimes on a Saturday. So I went back to them and said, guys, it's good, you're hard workers, dedicated, blah, 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 but you need to get the balance right. I don't want anybody to be burned out. And the answer was, yeah, we do kind of work a bit extra, but not as much as you think, because it's flexible. Who said it has to be 9 to 5? And we have some of our clients, actually many of them, we cover offices in Asia anyway. So why would I worry about somebody starting 10 o'clock a.m. if they're going to finish 8 p.m. supporting the Philippines? It has to be flexible. On the innovation part that Francois and David mentioned, can't agree more. The only point though is to be open with ourselves. How many of each role there is, what is the percentage of innovation for each role? And if somebody is sitting building new products and things like that, absolutely. But if I'm downloading from Oracle or SAP CSVs, manipulating data, copying it into a graph and things like that, there is hardly any innovation in that. And there is a lot of this work around. So the answer again would be depending on the role, the person.
Yeah, I think we learned very quickly within our Randstad business that whilst flexibility is great, you still need some structure when you're at home. So you're not caught doing 10, 12-hour days. You're not turning, the laptop's always on, the phone's always on. It's just making sure as an organisation that we're conscious of that. And then we start building in rules around the new ways of working. There's stories of people jumping in their car and driving down the road to end their day to mentally check out and then come back to their home. But all those sorts of things, absolutely, we need to learn with that. Maybe another controversial one for you, Wasim, investing in roads, infrastructure and transport versus investing in virtual roads, bandwidth. Have you got a point of view on that?
Absolutely. And a disclaimer, I am a vegan and I'm very concerned about the future of the planet. That's a disclaimer. It can work against me, but this is who I am. The way I look at it is another completely different angle, which is the pressure on roads and the environment. I believe that we as a nation in Australia invest much more in roads than we invest in networks. If you look at average speed compared with Singapore, Japan, and others, it's chalk and cheese. Luckily, after many years of bickering and fighting, now we're talking about NBN going back to the house as opposed to the node, which will help. So we'll not have crackling voices and not having blurry images. And that's important. I think there is a huge opportunity for us to digitize the economy, to take a bit of pressure from the roads. I take a car to go to a nice restaurant. There is nothing wrong with that. But why do I have to drive every day an hour and a half or 2 hours to go to an office to sit in a corner and talk to somebody for like an hour maximum during 8 hours? It doesn't make sense. I would rather bulk this hourly day into 1 or 2 days in the office, as everybody around the table said, and then the rest. I'm working remotely, better for me, better for my family, better for the environment. So definitely there's huge room for improvement when it comes to investing in infrastructure.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we certainly saw that within our organisation. I'm not sure whether all of you appreciate. There's one thing about working from home and working remotely, but you need to be set up for it. The services need to be there to be able to function. I'm not sure your experience, maybe Pip, with your people when they move to that work from home, the initial setup and the services.
Actually, a big call out for us for our IT team, who just did an awesome job, and frankly was a pretty seamless experience for all of us. So I think for some of us, it's probably have a better experience working from home than we do in parts of the office sometimes. I think so. No, I think yeah, that's certainly got to be a consideration. And the further, I guess, if we're talking about regional Australia, that's still certainly a challenge for us, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not sure, David, whether, and I know our IT team did a terrific job as well through that period of time, but the pressure, I suppose, that remote work brings on being able to have the services.
Oh yeah, look, I'm firsthand of having to set up remotely whilst trying to travel throughout Southeast Asia. So, I'll make a note though. I mean, Australia's probably in the top 5 in terms of like mobile broadband type of speeds. But for the landline sort of internet speeds, we're like at number 40. So it sort of gives you a bit of a direction of where they're trying to put the encouragement of how we want to work in Australia. So yeah, look, you're right about setting up at working from home. It is a challenge, and obviously trying to delegate and having access to the sufficient speeds and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And if we think back to the CBDs, Francois, and your experience, obviously working from home, did you had any challenges around the services? And then what are the benefits of, does that then lead to the conversation about the benefits of being in the CBD?
Yeah, so on your point about remote working and having a proper setup at home, it's also something to consider for businesses that are going to reduce their footprint, save money on real estate costs, but in return have to offer to staff whether it's a desk or a monitor or that proper setup. Some companies, technology companies such as Google, are paying for all their employees' home internet connections. So we might see these being implemented more largely. Yeah.
Okay, all right, for sure. Now, look, I'll leave everyone to one final answer to the main question, and we'll go around. So the topic today: workplace and remote work. What future for our CBDs? Wazim, maybe if you kick it off, what's the overarching take on that for you?
I think it would be a bit challenging to the CBDs based on the current setup. As Francois and David talked about how the offering could change, that may help, but definitely I have no doubt it will be a very challenging period for the CBD. It doesn't mean it will go away, but it's not going to be the same. And I think there is downward pressure on the CBD. It may turn out to be the hub. Instead of central business district, it will be central fund district or innovation district for people to come and collectively think about new ideas of doing things or have lunches together. Yeah, that's kind of our view.
Okay, maybe David, to you, the wrap up on workplace and remote work. What future for our CBDs?
Look, I think there are opportunities and amazing deals everywhere for that from a CBD perspective. So anyone who can innovate and potentially turn that space into something more practical and usable, I think that's where the opportunity lies. I think that's where things are going to evolve, particularly around from Melbourne to in retail and also in the Sydney CBD retail side. Yeah,
excellent. And like you said, that opportunity and the innovation absolutely. It presents that to us now, right? To do
definitely,
slightly differently. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Francois, workplace and remote work. What future for our CBDs?
I'd say that humans are creatures of habits, and COVID has forced us to change the way we work, the way we see the workplace and offices in general. And I think that the times ahead are very exciting. And there's a lot of things for businesses and for individual to think about.
Yeah, excellent. The opportunities that are presented, right? Rather than let's look at the positive rather than the negative. Good way of looking at it. And Pip, I'll leave with you as the last. Workplace and remote work. What future for our CBDs?
I think it's a great opportunity for us to rethink the role of the CBD. I think there's the definite need for us to have spaces where we can continue to come together, but perhaps we can think about our sustainability going forward and what the CBD kind of needs to adapt to be the place potentially where we live, we work, where we shop and we eat. And so maybe it's a great opportunity for us to really rethink the role of the CBD.
Okay, all right. Well, from everyone, a big thank you to all of you for participating on the panel today. Thank you very much. Insightful comments and some things that we've thought of, I'm sure, in the past, but there's new concepts, particularly the digital FTE. I like that one, about what does that look like into the future. Maybe the opportunities within commercial real estate, Francois, in regards to residential, how does that look? Or even, David, to your point around, the shared workspace and how does that look into the future? For sure. And obviously, Pip, we talked right at the top about the changing workplace and COVID created that, which then creates the opportunity to look at things a little bit differently. So thanks very much for your insights. I'd like to invite everyone now to follow us on our live Zoom Q&A, which is coming up. The link hopefully will be shared with you in the meeting chat room. So once again, look forward to catching up with everyone for the 15-minute chat, live chat. So thank you once again for participating, and let's speak again soon.